Welcome everyone to the Tier 3 race with WOR. We're going to race around Spain for round 4, so please bear with me just a moment. We are getting into the lobby, and we are going to get ready to race. It is going to be a full lobby. I think we're going to have 18 drivers or 19 drivers on the grid, which will be very exciting to see what's going to happen around such a twisty circuit with a lot of overtaking opportunities. And I don't know about you guys, but I mean, I've never seen these drivers, but I know of some of these gamer tags, and I know that they have quite a few fast drivers in their ranks. So it'll be interesting to see who's going to pull out a miracle around this track, do a two-stop. Maybe we're going to see some Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton type games where they're going to go for that extra pit stop and have a massive pace advantage. Or are we just going to see some very smooth sailing one-stops, medium to hard or hard to medium, which is always a classic strategy for all. Now as we get into qualifying, 18 minutes of qualifying, and we will be able to see what these drivers can do. 18 drivers on the grid, there it is. And I believe it is, we are missing one Haas driver, and I believe it is an AlphaTauri driver we are missing. So no chance of double stacking for them two, which is a huge advantage on a circuit where you can lose quite a bit of time in the pits. I think that was a Red Bull coming out, but actually, who was the first car out? That looks like a Williams out on the track. Or no, that was, yeah, it's a Williams. Williams of Alvaro Fernandez. I'd like to start the stream as well off to say I do apologize if I pronounce anyone's names wrong. I will try my best to pronounce them. If I can't, I will have to think of something short because I don't want to keep making the same mistake several times in the stream. So now we've got 18 minutes, and Alvaro will be the first driver to set the time for provisional pole, of course, setting for his first hot lap. He will be putting in purple first sector. Is he the only driver out? Well, sorry, the first driver's across the line. And one of the most exciting parts of this track that I find quite enjoyable now, because the chicane was by far, I think for many people, one of the least favourite features of this circuit. We're now going to see Alvaro come towards that chicane. You can see the chicane passing to your right, but instead we now have two right-handers back-to-back, all high-speed corners, as we now come across the line to start the first hot lap of the session with Alvaro. So please, let's have a look at what he can set as the first hot lap of the session, the first pole position lap time in this session. Into this first few corners, it's an uphill left and right hander. You've got to be very careful, very tricky on the throttle. It's very easy to have the back end step out of line and unfortunately send your car spinning. Now down this is straight into the second sector. He sets a 1:24.79 in that first sector, which unfortunately I don't know if that is good or not, so we'll have to see what the other drivers can put in. Now we've got the S's, the uphill hand S's, 7 and 8. Again, another very tricky corner. You could take too much curb or too much throttle going into those corners. You will lose your back end. A quick right hand, 90-degree corner into corner 9. You've got the DRS straight down into the final sector, corner 10. A lot of drivers in the previous games have a lot of difficulty getting on the throttle, and in this game as well, it is very difficult to get on the throttle. You get it on too early, your car will spin. Now you got the final couple corners, and it's just a quick, fast sweep right again, and DRS will be wide open in just a moment. There it is. And now to the line, the provisional time is a 1:10.922 for Alvaro, as it's quickly beaten by Max in the house with a 1:10.8.495. Of course, now the time will start to tumble down the order, and Alvaro will not maintain the top 3 position at the moment. As you can see, Deja with a 1:10.770, and Stefano with a 1:10.802 quickly demotes him down into P5. So you will see the driver tumble down the order, but the track evolution will continue to evolve. And as the track goes on and people drive further and further around the circuit, timings will increase. And already, we're seeing just a 4/10 gap in the top 10. And just for a first hot lap, that is incredibly close for everyone. In fact, the two Williamses are just outside of 2/100ths of a second apart, as I believe that was 6:10 in the... No, that was not 6:10, but he puts in a 1:10.850, 1/1000th of a second slower off of P3, still on for the second row, but just that tiny bit slower, and unfortunately could not quite get ahead on that second row. But of course, this is just 13.5 minutes into the session. As I mentioned, the track will ramp up, and the timings will tumble. I have a funny feeling we will certainly have at least one, maybe two drivers dropping into the 109s. Or if not into the 109s, certainly into the low 110s. Because there is plenty of time you can gain around this circuit with a tow or even without a tow. Fresh tyres, ERS, low fuel, absolutely to the minimum of fuel. So we see the Aston Martin and the AlphaTauri going too wide into that final sector, now into the pits to end their first hot lap. A couple drivers still yet to set a time. Tim Bayer in the Aston Martin, sitting in P15, has not come out. And the same with Exafox for the Red Bull. We've got Wario out for a session. He's out for his outlap. And Mark, who we're now spectating, was on a hot lap, but unfortunately has invalidated. And perhaps they will have enough fuel. I don't think they do have enough fuel to go for a back-to-back lap. So we will see them go into the pits. But let's have a look and see, pardon me, let's see the other direction. Let's see what Wario can do as he starts his first hot lap of this fourth round around Spain. And let's see how well they can do. So the provisional time to beat for P1, a 1:10.770, and we saw Alvaro put in a 21.4 in the first sector. So now going into that second corner, he goes very wide. You see the car getting very out of hand. And that will certainly lose him quite a bit of time now as he comes towards the line to finish the first sector. It'll be a 22.333, which is certainly not a very quick time. But it is his first lap. He does put in a purple first sector, but I'm not sure I trust that, considering a 21.7 was put in before. So we'll have to see what he can do into the second. So now to 7 and 8. Keeps it very stable, just goes onto the yellow curb, but surprisingly keeps his car well under control. Now into the second DRS straight with the drag reduction system, where the rear wing will open up, increasing the speed of the car. Helps increase the overtake opportunities that the drivers have. You can see him going slightly wide there out of turn 10. Now coming around the long right-hander, into 13 and 14. The quick right-hand chicanes, and actually he's not going to finish that lap. Not too happy with that lap at all, and is going to decide to throw it in the pits, which is fair enough. Still, with about 11 minutes left in the session, he will have plenty of time to come back out and put in a lap. We've got Tim currently going through the first few corners. Now his first hot lap of the session. Let's see what the Aston Martin driver can do. A 1:21.4, and that being a purple first sector, that I can trust, because a 1:21 is roughly what other drivers were setting. So now he's got the uphill left-hander, right-hander, 7 and 8. Seen a few drivers just go on the curb, and I think that might be where the pace is at. Quick right-hander, and you got this very long DRS straight. There's a lot of traffic ahead of him. Hopefully they will all be able to get out of the way just in time. A purple middle sector of 50.037. Could this be a pole lap? We'll have to see. Now coming around the long 12 right-hander, he's got a Red Bull in his way. And in fact, I don't know if that's going to do him any good. It's not. The Red Bull's actually going to go for a hot lap himself. And the Aston Martin has had to ditch that lap. And unfortunately invalidates with traffic ahead of him. A very unfortunate end to what potentially could have been a very good lap for the Aston Martin driver. And let's have a look actually at that Red Bull driver who did block him on that lap. Let's see what Julio Figueira can do. Please, I do apologize if I do mispronounce your name. I'll stick with Julio. Into that first sector, a 1:21.4, just a few 100ths of a second off of his time, and unfortunately you can see him spinning, and now is off into the gravel. Hopefully that... Oh, and I've been disconnected. Please bear with me whilst I try and reconnect to the lobby. Fortunately, this game has a lot of a lot of issues where you can just get randomly disconnected for no reason at all, and that's what's happened to me there. But unfortunately, just before as I got disconnected, we did see Julio going round, what was that, corner 4, I believe it was, in the second sector, and lost the back end entirely, and that spun him into the wall. Hopefully that won't be any rear wing damage. That will mean he will have to pit and get that repaired. Fortunately, it's instant repair in a multiplayer lobby, but that is still a very good first sector that had to be ditched, unfortunately, due to that mistake. So now that we're back into the qualifying session, we still got 4 drivers yet to set a lap, and I believe Wario, yeah, Wario's just started his lap. Tim's decided to ditch. Apologies, everyone, for that. Unfortunately, I'm having some technical problems on my end, and I can't actually quite understand why that is happening. So I've never had this problem before. As we have a new pole sitter, a few tumbling times, as we see Tamas in the Mercedes, a 110.746. Sixton with a 110.670, and then Harlem in the Alfa Romeo with a 110.6 point. I'm making the same mistake. I do apologize. A 110.646. So just exactly a tenth splitting the top 3, which is quite interesting to see. But unfortunately, still, Tim has yet to set a lap. He's actually coming around that final sector, so hopefully we'll be able to see him put in a lap. And we're going to see the Red Bull put in a lap now as well, across the line, 12th place for him. Now let's see what the Red Bull can do, the Aston Martin do for the first time in the session. 6 minutes left to go, and he's got himself a Red Bull ahead of him, but hopefully they are out the way. They are now into the first sector. Very stable on the throttle. Very stable car through those sectors. No squirrelness at all. Now to finish the first sector, he puts in a 141.455, which is a very good first sector. May not be the fastest, but it's not always about being fast. You can always have a slow first sector and fast in the second and third and find all the time that you need for pole there. We'll have to see what Tim can do now. Coming into 7 and 8, the quick left and right-hander. Slight snap of oversteer there that he had to correct. Now the snap of the right. DRS wide open, a beautiful angle for that, but I want to see the driver drive, not his rear wing. Now we got 10, 11, very careful on the throttle. You can see that application of throttle, very slow, very gradual. Trying to get around the corners now, just 2 more to go, and he can finish his first hot lap of the session. And with 5 minutes remaining, what time is it going to be? Is it going to be a 110 with the rest of the group, or is he going to put it even further and up on pole? He puts it in for 17th place, a 110.986. Unfortunately, very slow compared to the rest of the grid, though still in the 110s and in the top 17s. We'll have to see where he can improve. You are able to have up to 2 fresh sets of softs, so you can have up to 4 fresh sets of softs for qualifying, depending on the tyre set allocation you choose for that weekend. So we'll have to see what he goes for and if he has the tyre set available. You can see there, everyone is opting to go for fresh tyres. They're probably going to wait in the pits for the timer to tick down. And when it achieves around about, I suspect, 2 minutes to a minute 30, a lot of these drivers are going to start coming out for their final hot lap of the session and hammer out these times and try and put it up on pole. And unfortunately, I don't have any predictions as to who it could be, because everyone is so close, and I've not seen any of these drivers, well, drive. So I'm certainly interested to know who is going to be the one to put it up on pole. So we have the Haas going into that second sector. Currently actually on a hot lap, but unfortunately is about 2.5 tenths slow in that second sector. So this won't be an improvement lap for him. And hopefully, I think he does have more than enough time if he needed to dive in the pits. He's going to go in the pits now and grab himself a fresh set of softs. As we have a new pole sitter, Mark with the Ferrari for ET8 as the Haas is retired, puts it on pole for a 1:10.601. Sorry, okay, my prediction of 109s is impossible. It says T4 at the top right. I do apologize for that. Yeah, I will fix that in just a moment in the transition towards the race, as we are coming to. Actually, we'll do it now. I do apologize for that mistake. It is my bad. So please do bear with me. There we go. It's been fixed. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, at least it wasn't the race that that mistake was pointed out to me. So thank you for bringing that up now in qualifying. But as we have a new pole sitter, a 1:10.582, an incredible lap by the Alpine driver, now puts it up on pole, increasing that gap by 2/100ths of a second. So a very slim gap between him and rest. Oh, sorry, to the drivers in P2. As unfortunately, again, disconnection problems are not serving me justice this race, and I'm now missing out on such an exciting qualifying session. New drivers are constantly putting up there on pole. See, I don't understand why I'm having these issues, because it comes back to me as excellent connection and no latency problems, yet I still disconnect 1,000 times in the session. So hopefully, fingers crossed, touch wood, it is stable, and I don't have the issue during the race. But now, with only just a minute left in this session, drivers are retiring, happy or unhappy with their laps. And I think the Alpine potentially could go for another lap. No, he's going to go through the chicane. I think that's just mostly to avoid other drivers. Harlem is currently on a lap going through the second sector. Now down towards the 10th corner, puts in a lap, or a time, sorry, 8 tenths slower. So I don't think there's going to be much improvement there for the Alfa Romeo driver. Sixton for the Alpha Tauri. Now coming around the final few corners. Goes a bit wide. He doesn't actually manage to. He does destroy the brake marker there, unfortunately. But now he's going to come around the final few corners, full pelt to the line, and he does improve by 2 tenths, but unfortunately he's not enough to try and take a position from anyone else. Next to come towards the line, I believe that's a blue car. As we have Sixton putting it on pole, a 1:10.5, a 1/1000th of an improvement for pole. Gonna have the Williams go into the pits. We've got the Red Bull putting a purple middle sector, so we now have to jump back to him when we can in just a moment. As we have the McLaren going through. He's not on a hot lap. We've got Alpha Tauri, or Alfa Romeo, sorry, he's going through. So we got a lot of drivers absolutely blitzing it through this corner, or through the circuit. And I think actually it'll just be the Alfa Romeo, the last driver left to put in a hot lap, and actually they are not going to improve by enough, and that will be the end of the session for them. So that was qualifying. My voice is going there, apologies. A 1/1000th of a second difference between the drivers. That is an incredible lap by the pair of them. And that is very scary to think. That is how close they are in qualifying. Now, if you think, qualifying, you are running low fuel, and you are running with 100% ERS deployment. You've got to deploy every bit of ERS you have available in the bank. You want to finish the lap. You want to cross the line with nothing left in that tank, in that battery, to get the absolute top speeds possible. And they put it across the line with almost identical times. It's incredible to see. And so now we have the race just after. Congratulations to Sixten in the AlphaTauri to put it on pole by such a slim margin. I've honestly, in 7 months or 8 months of commentating, I have never once seen a driver manage to put it on pole by such a margin as that. As again, I have been disconnected. I do apologize. I do not understand what is going on here. All happened as soon as I changed the overlay. I corrected the overlay. Definitely was the problem. So now as we wait for the session to end for the end of qualifying, hopefully we can rejoin before the race starts. There it is. And I believe it will be just on the starting grid. We'll be able to see what kind of tyres people may have on. And jump straight into the 5 red lights, and away we go for what I'm hoping will be a very exciting race. So now as we wait, drivers will be getting their strategies in order, underfueling or overfueling as they desire. And we will be able to see what kind of strategy are people going to go for. Now, I know that a lot of drivers will potentially prefer the medium to the hard. You start on the softer compound compared to the hards. You start when you've got the heavy load of fuel, and then when you get to the lower fuel, the hards will come into play. But this is also Spain. I know that a lot of drivers have a lot of success with starting on the hards. So it'll be interesting to see how they do. So now we've got the 5 red lights. We are going to have no formation lap, and let's see what the drivers can do as Sixten gets a decent start. Apparently I'm on the grid as well, so this will be interesting to see. We managed to cover the inside line. And into the first corner, 3 wide at the back there between the Alfa Romeo, the Aston Martin, and the Ferrari. The Ferrari gets ahead. The Aston Martin is tumbled down the order slightly. The Aston Martin is trying to fight back and claw his way back up. 3 wide again, down into the third corner. And the Red Bull with the inside line tries to snake his way all the way up. There are actually a lot of drivers on the softs. In fact, it's a good composition between softs and hards for the drivers. And you can see the softs are definitely going to work out. 4 wide now, almost into the 9th corner. Into the 7th corner. Now coming up that hill is relative smooth sailing. There's a lot of tussling going on at the back of the grid there. Unfortunately, Ivan's gone down 3 positions, but Candyland King has gone up by 3, so he's a lot of fighting going on there. But there's a couple drivers gone spinning out, and Julio has gone down the order. Tim is down the order, and Ryan has also gone down the order just a tad bit. There's Candy and Stefano trying to fight it out 2 wide. Here comes Pablo down the inside into that 12th corner, 13th corner, now to the 14th corner. Sixten with the fastest lap of this race, maintaining lead of this race, and a 7/10 gap between P1 and P2. As you see, the McLarens, both of them going too wide with their opponents, Alvaro and Wario around them, as Tim now goes ahead, and Aljat remains in his position. Pablo again going too wide with that Ferrari driver. In fact, is with the Aston Martin and the Mercedes behind. He is trying to defend as best as he can. Aston Martin with the hard compound tire defending beautifully amongst the soft runners around him, and is able to maintain his pace with them at the moment. The question is, how far can the softs go before they are going to drop off a cliff, and the hards are going to come into the picture as the better tire, the better option in this race. Now Sixten with that soft tyre advantage, a 1.5 second gap between P1 and P2, but still a very squashed up grid throughout the order. Unfortunately, Ryan and Julio at the back of the grid, having to pit off the first lap after a first lap incident with Sixten, another fastest lap, a 1:13.821. But Ryan and Julio now on alternate strategies, starting on, I believe it was the softs and the hards, and now starting on the mediums for the second lap and third lap of this race. We'll have to see what kind of strategy they're going to go for. Potentially finish the race for a medium strategy, as they have already served their mandatory pit stop in this session. We're going to have another fight all the way at the top of the grid. We've got Fox trying to close that gap down to Mark ahead of him. Of course, he's going to have the softs. The softs will certainly be in power for at least the next 4 to 5 laps over the hards before the hards might start to have an advantage, as Julio is the first driver to receive a time penalty and is for speeding in the pit lane. And unfortunately, that will be the end of his race in this session. Unfortunate start for the driver there. Now, as we've got time change in position, DRS is enabled. You can see all those rear wings are open as the Mercedes driver is trying to climb his way through. Why am I in the race? I do not know why. There does seem to be a little bit of jittering on potentially my end. Hopefully it is all clear on your end there. But now for the fourth lap of the race, we have a yellow flag. That is for the retired driver Julio. His car will be AI driven out of the pits. And in fact, he has left the session as well after that. Fine for you, perfect. Glad to hear it's fine for someone. At least we're going to have the two Mercedes going too wide. We got Aston, so we got the McLaren trying to get into this fight as well, and the Aston Martin as well. And for a moment there, you can see actually the Mercedes is getting ghosted there through the cars, and hopefully that isn't because of a disconnection problem, but he is going to tumble down the order, and the Aston Martin is now trying to put his nose around and ahead of that McLaren ahead of him. Unfortunately, could not quite get it ahead, but they are all on the same tyre compounds. It is just a matter of time when those softs fall off, and we'll have to see who's going to be able to play off the right strategy. As you can see, the McLaren just going slightly a bit deep. The Aston Martin looking to the inside, now to the outside line, will have the disadvantage in the next few corners, and the Williams potentially could have a look, as Alvaro is now the first driver to receive a 3-second time penalty for track limits. Very unfortunate race for him so far, but it is very much possible to gain a 3-second gap. We'll have to see what he can do. You can see now the Aston Martin closing that gap down, though because of the mass DRS train, every driver trying to keep it as close together as they can, he's not going to gain as much of an advantage as he would have hoped, gaining an extra 13 kilometers per hour on that straight. You're actually touching the grass there on the inside, almost losing control of his car. It's actually great work, great skill to keep control of the car there. As you can see, the two Mercedes are still going strong. Alternate strategies between the two of them, with the soft runner ahead to try and help the hard runner behind defend. Now a 2.5-second gap between Sixten and Deha in P1 and P2. So those softs are working out beautifully in his favor, and it's helping him create a gap behind, a cushion behind, so that when he has to pit, he will be able to have less time lost when he goes in. teammate for Mercedes, Jat, looking to the inside, not quite close enough. Definitely wants to see where the competition is at as he tries to defend from the Aston Martin behind. In fact, all the fighting right now is in the middle of the pack, whilst the front are just maintaining their gaps and their pace, waiting for their opportune moment to capitalize on old tires or potential mistakes made. We got the Williams going down the inside, sorry, with a DRS advantage and the tire advantage. He's going to stick his nose down the inside, and with a late brake into that first corner, and now into the left and right-handers 2 and 3. He is going to have his car up into P7. Another soft runner just ahead of him, 2.5 tenths ahead of him, as the Haas does try and fight back, but unfortunately is not quite close enough. Now, actually, it is starting to heat up. I think the tyres are slowly starting to die as Sixton has lost half a second. Nay, he's lost 6 tenths now in that first and second sector. Now down to 1.9 seconds as a gap, and Deha is closing in quickly on the hard compound right ahead of him. Mark perhaps not managing his tyres as much as he would have hoped to have done, as we have a change in position behind, with the Haas going around the outside. You got Pablo on the inside with the soft tyres. He's trying to go for a move, but into the fast right-hander, and then a right-hander again. He's going to have the DRS advantage, but for how much longer will he have the advantage with those tyres? We're going to see on board with Max. You can see the Williams slowly closing in. He is going to go for a move down the inside. Can he go late on the brakes enough to maintain that overtake? He can, and into the braking zone. He has managed to take himself into P7, but here comes Max again, fighting back, trying to go round the outside into turn 3, now down towards turn 4. No DRS for another sector. It is now just down purely to the race pace of these drivers, and I think Pablo will be able to maintain that 7th place. There is a fight, though. The two teammates are battling out as Jack gets ahead of Tim. Those hards are now working in his favour, as the softs are clearly not doing any favours for the McLaren and for many of the drivers on the grid. You can already see the timing screen, the top of the timing screen, 1.5 seconds between 1 and 2 as we have a change in order in 3rd place. Pardon me, as Harlem gets through into 4th place in the hards now. You can see very clearly the hards are coming into play and the softs are dying very quickly, and this is where the drivers have to make that strategy call to box now. Box, box, box. When are they going to pull that trigger? Because if they go any further, they risk those tyres continuing to die, as that timer goes down even further. 1.146 is the time as they go through the brake marker for the first sector, or the first corner. Gonna have Pablo fighting again. Fortunately, I've missed a couple of these positions, but Pablo and Stefano fighting still on old softs. He is going to be under pressure from Max behind those hards again. This is where having those hard compound tyres are going to be crucial. The second sector requires a lot of front-end grip. Be able to climb the hill, turn the car, and the rear-end grip to get out of the corner. And this is going to hurt a lot for these drivers. We have Candy King falling down the order, and Tim as well. Both of those soft drivers, unfortunately, not quite getting the grip or the exits they want. Tim once fighting in P10, now down to P14. And unfortunately, I think just might lose out another position here down this straight if he can't get a good enough exit down towards turn 11 and 12. Five drivers now, all very close to one another. Ivan all the way through up to Pablo, all with alternating strategies. Now it will be a massive DRS strain as we see Candy King and Tim both into the pits off of those soft compound tires, whilst we still have four soft runners in this race, and that's Stefano, Pablo, Fox, and Sixton, all in the top 7. Both drivers, Tim and Candy, have gone for the hard compound tire. Tamas, Mercedes teammate, gets through into P14 now. And unfortunately, another position lost for the Ferrari, as the McLaren manages to get through. Now into the second half of this sector. If you're not careful on the throttle, not careful on how you manage your tyres, it will be an easy spin, and hopefully these drivers are quick enough and smart enough to be able to know where they can push the tyres and where they can manage it. And I think This will be interesting to see if perhaps a driver will opt to go for a soft medium strategy over a soft hard for this session. In fact, I don't even think a soft hard is possible. A one stop. Please do correct me if I'm wrong. But I'm not too certain if a one stop is possible. As Mark is now down to just outside the 1 second window for P1 here. And we go for lap 10 in this race. Fox, Pablo, and Stefano still with incredible pace on 9-lap-old softs, maintaining their gaps ahead and behind to the drivers around them on the much better compound now. Mark now within that 1 second window. Sixton will be under pressure very soon. He's going to have the DRS advantage to help close that gap down, while Sixton will just have to continuously hammer out the same lap over and over again in the hopes to try and better the exits and better the entry and maintain that gap. Now down to 8/10. They're coming around the 12th corner, coming down 13 and 14. The quick right-handers, when they get rid of the chicane, you have fast, high-speed chases into that third sector, and all the more excitement for it. Now 7.5 tenths, a long DRS straight all the way down to the first corner, and that Ferrari man will not be able to fight for that P1 just yet, but we certainly will see him continue to close that gap down, and now into the first corner. It's a 4/10 gap between the two of them, and so the interest here is how far can Mark go. He will need to push and try and get the position as soon as possible and help and have them AlphaTauri, help him defend from the Alpine and try and get the position ahead. We have Alvaro trying to fight off Wario, unfortunately. Wario trying to fight off Alvaro, and Alvaro gets through with a 3-second time penalty, receiving that at the very start of this race for track limits. And unfortunately, you cannot serve a 3-second time penalty. Only 5s and 10s can be served in the pits. And so that will be added on to his race time at the end of the session. As our timing sheets now finally update and correctly update. So now, as we go in for this is the 1/3 of the race complete. They're going to come towards the line to finish lap 11. Sorry, Sexton putting the time on pole with the list should be correct now. It has been updated. Sixton with a 1:10.581 puts it on pole, and it's incorrect again, unfortunately. Is now going to be under pressure from Mark, as Mark tries to put his car down the inside into the braking zone. He's got the outside line into the second and third corner, and I think the AlphaTauri has got just enough pace left in his car to maintain P1 in this race. But I say that now, here comes Ferrari down the inside into that fourth corner now, down the hill. And Mark, for the first time in this race, now leads this race around Catalunya. And his teammate behind, currently sitting in 9th place, tries to go down the inside, down the hill into the 5th corner, coming down towards the 6th, 7th, and 8th, uphill left and right-hander. His teammate on the hard compound tyre, sorry, soft compound tyre, very old soft compound tyre, has managed to get himself up into P9 now for this race session. So Mark now leading from 16 to Deja. Qualifying positions, it was 16 to Deja to Mark. So Mark has managed to improve 3 positions on an alternate strategy. There you go. You can see Sixton now sick of those soft compound tyres. He's going to go for his first stop. Fox has opted to stay out and continue to extend his stint on the softs, and the same with Pablo and Stefano opting to stay out on those softs. So I wonder how far they think they can go on those soft compound tyres before they will drop off like a rock. Sixton opting for the medium, so perhaps we will see a soft medium strategy coming out here around Catalunya this evening. As Sixton started on the softs, as you once saw earlier, now has opted for the mediums, coming out in 14th place. And now has quite a way. He does have a massive advantage, however. The drivers all ahead of him have old hards, 12-lap old hards, which will lose them a lot of time, along with the 12-lap old softs. Now the grid is still quite bunched up, but I think it's going to be a matter of when do people want to pit and change onto their second tyres. It's just those 3 runners on the softs who need to pit, whilst the hard compound riders, I believe, can survive for at least another 7 or 8 laps. What the best strategy for Spain for a 50% race? Well, I think we'll find out here, but I think it just might be you start on those hards. You see Pablo and Stefano now pit off of those softs. Fox remains out on his softs. In fact, he manages to gain a position on those old softs, now up into 4th place with 13 lap old softs. Surely they must be crying. I have no clue how this Red Bull driver is maintaining this sort of pace around such a tricky circuit that requires a lot of front and rear end grip. Downforce plays a massive factor around the circuit, which is why when the DRS is enabled, it is a huge game changer, increasing their speed by 13 to 15 kilometers per hour on that main straight, and that is a huge amount of pace advantage on such a long straight. Although, as you can see here, the Red Bull and the Alfa Romeo is going to come down towards the second DRS straight. Alfa Romeo, with that advantage, is not quite a long enough straight for the DRS to be so effective. If anything, it will help to close the gap, so when you come into the third sector, you can go for the overtake. But, I mean, this is coming from me. These drivers have managed to pull off some sensational moves in some corners and sectors that I never imagined would be possible. And we can see now the Red Bull is still not going in for the 14th lap in this race. And now starting the 15th lap, he is going to continue on those very old softs. And they are showing you strategies. I mean, the one stop may be powerful, but the one stop or the 2 stop on the softs, I mean, he's able to make it work. It should be working for everyone else then. We'll have to see what he can do at the end of this race. After, if we look at the qualifying positions, he qualified in 8th place. He's now climbed 5 positions and is maintaining a top 5 position right now on those old tyres. We have now Ivan in the pits. The Aston Martin has gone in to serve his stop. He's come out off of the hards and onto those mediums. So now 18 laps on the mediums. We'll have to see if that's possible. And I think, considering the tyre conservation that a lot of these drivers have shown us thus far, I think it is very much possible, as my car is also now in the pits. Unfortunately, due to disconnection problems, I reconnected to the lobby, and I have a car on the grid. So I do apologise for that, and hopefully it is not an issue for the drivers on the track, as it should be ghosted for the duration of this session. There we go. The timing sheets have now corrected. Mark with a half-second gap to Deja behind. Harlan with a 2.7 second gap. And there it is. Fox is finally done with those softs. The McLaren for Jat, Haas for Max, and Alvaro in the Williams have all decided to pit now. And there goes the one-stop strategy for the Red Bull. He's gone for the soft medium strat, whilst many have opted for the hard medium. You can see Max coming out, Jack coming out on the mediums, Alvaro as well, and Stefano with a new fastest lap of the session, a 1:13.675, an incredible lap for that driver. So now we'll have to see what can Stefano do. He's currently sitting in 11th place on those 2-lap-old mediums, pitting off of the softs. How far can he now extend this second stint, as he once did on those softs at the first stint? I do apologise for the timing error. Mark is still in the lead of the race. Tomas is not in P1. Now the race does certainly start to come down a little bit as we try and wait for the tyres to come into play and see how the drivers are going to use it. You can see Fox heavily under pressure from the Williams behind. The question is how much pressure can he handle before he loses that position? As we have Wario now pitting. The top 5 still yet to pit after starting this race on the hard compound tyres. Wario off of those hards in P6 now goes in for the mediums. We're going to see a couple drivers going too wide. The Ferrari and the Aston Martin, the Williams, and with the Aston Martin and the Mercedes all trying to go for a move down that back straight. And the Williams gets ahead. The Aston Martin gets ahead. And unfortunately, Stefano only gains 1 position out of that fight, whilst Pablo and Ivan climb a position ahead of them continually. So far now, 17 laps through, and only one driver with a time penalty. And I have to say, that is mighty impressive to see for a circuit that is very easy for your car to step out of line. You can see here Stefano goes into this uphill left and right-hander, 7 and 8. Very easy for the car to step out of shape. In fact, we saw the Aston Martin have that happen to him. And as I'm talking about it, Deha with a 3-second time penalty for track limit. He's in the pits now. P1 and P2 have pulled the trigger. And Harlem is now your new race leader. Third race leader of this session, as Tomas also pits off of those hard combat tyres. And Tim is the only driver on the grid now who is still yet to pit and is going strong on those hards as he finds himself in P2. Harlem leading the race for the first time as Max puts in a fastest lap, a 1:12.888 for the Red Bull team. Oh, sorry, not the Red Bull team, the Haas team. But Harlem now leads. With this 8-second gap behind, he will not lose too many positions. But our previous race leader, Sixton, currently sitting in P4 with a half-second gap to Tim ahead of him, who is on old tyres. A massive advantage to the AlphaTauri driver. And it will be a matter of time. And in fact, it just might be in this next DRS straight that we'll see Sixton put his car up in for P3 into this race. Let's have a look on board. He's going to close that gap down. Now down to 1.5 tenths. And he goes just for a simple move down the inside. He's got a massive pace advantage. You can actually see going very deep on the brakes and potentially some rear locking there. But he manages to make that move stick. Now up into third place. His next driver ahead of him that he needs to watch out for is Harlem, who's leading this race, crossing the line again for the 19th lap in this session. Tim is opting to now pit off of those hards, stopping just in time. Unfortunately, no drivers so far in this race, or other than one, sorry, have received a 5-second time penalty for speeding in the pit lane. And Tim also continues that streak and stops in time. 7.5 seconds is the gap between P1 and P2. 6.5 seconds between P2 and P3. The timing sheets are confused again. So Harlem is continuing to extend this gap. But for how much longer can he go before Sixton will cut that gap down, Mark will cut that gap down, and he will lose a lot of positions for this sacrifice. Slightly further down the order, we've got the McLaren and the Ferrari trying to fight very close to one another. Stefano pitting 2 laps earlier than the McLaren. The question is, was that 2 laps a huge loss or a huge advantage? Did he manage to gain enough time on his outlap to capitalize on the small advantage he had whilst the other drivers were on old tyres? Ajat trying to close that gap down, still trying to close that gap down. The Haas is coming into the fight now as well. All 3 of them, Alvaro, Max, and Jat, all pitting at the same time. But unfortunately, Alvaro just outside of that fight by 1.157 seconds as they cross the line. And will not have DRS for this lap. Harlem continues on those old hards. We're going to see them go too wide. McLaren going for a move down the inside, very late on the brakes, pushing the Ferrari wide and onto the runoff track. And comes back onto the track to take P10 again. Alvaro with a 3-second time penalty for multiple warnings. And here comes the Haas now, trying to fight for P9. But unfortunately, he's not quite close enough. And unfortunately, Stefano was pushed off the track there, keeping it well under control. Manages to maintain that position, but gains no advantage from running off there. Wario now getting through ahead of Candyland down that second DRS straight. Simple move between 2 drivers on alternating strategy. Apologies for the black screens. As Deja now pits another time for the soft compound tyres, down in 16th place. I'm confused, Selim. If the lobby is gone, I've not received a ping to know about this. To the best of my knowledge, this race is still going on, as Sixten is in the lead of the race, unfortunately due to desync problems, or at least connection problems on potentially my end. The timing screens will show otherwise. Sixten is in the lead with Mark in P2 and Fox currently sitting in P3. Fox now closing that gap down. He's down to 6/10 to Mark ahead of him, as Ryan receives a 3-second time penalty for track limits. Unfortunately, that is a penalty that cannot be served till the end of the race. We have the McLaren going too wide to the first corner. Stefano trying to go for a move. Trying to defend the move around the outside. Now the inside line into the third corner. And the McLaren just can't quite get it around. Now the two Williams are in this fight as Pablo with the inside line. There is a collision now between the McLaren, the Williams, and the Ferrari. Stefano is spun around. And it does not appear as though there is any damage to the drivers around them. But Stefano now out of that battle for P9, down to P13. And hopefully no damage to him. Otherwise that will be a huge loss in this race. Downforce is a key factor around this circuit. And that is not something we want to see for these drivers. Sixten continuing to extend his lead, though he does have a disadvantage of the drivers behind. Mark extending his initial lead, or his initial stint, went on for another 5 laps before pitting. Now we will actually see Sixten lapping the Mercedes driver. First driver on the grid, I believe, to be lapped. As we have Harlem getting a position taken, getting a position ahead of Pablo. In fact, Pablo's going very slow on that main straight. I'm not too certain as to why he was very slow on that straight. But now Stefano is up into 12th place. And Harlem, who was once leading this race, is in 12th place. In 10th place, sorry. And Mark is now into the lead of the race. I do apologize for that. I do apologize for my confusion. The timing screen's not updating with the race is slightly infuriating. Sixten is in the lead of the race with a 1.5 second gap. 6/10 to the gap to Fox behind, as Tomas is lapped again by, now very soon will be lapped by Ivan in P4. Steha receives another 3-second time penalty for track limits. A very unfortunate race for the Alpine driver, who once was at the top of those sheets, is now down towards the bottom as Ryan retires from the session, is now out of the session. Alvaro trying to close that gap down. Alvaro with 6 seconds of time penalties, unfortunately due to track limits, but can still have an on-track victory and say, I got that position over you. Is now closing that gap down. 2/10 between him and Max ahead of him. And he's got the McLaren and the Alpine just behind, trying to close that gap down. And now 3 drivers are out of this race, 24 laps out of 33. And we're going to see what's going to happen is drivers are getting very feisty between one another. The tyres are starting to come in play for Harlem as he tries to close that gap down to Wario ahead of him. Now into the top 9, half a second between him and Wario. Are we going to see him manage to close that gap down even further and try and climb once leading this race for a few laps? Now down to P9. As Tomas with a 3-second time penalty, and Pablo has now retired from this session. And Mark into the leader race. I do apologize for not catching that on the stream, but Sixton has now lost the lead of the race, and Mark, with an alternate strategy to go ahead with 5-lap fresher mediums, is now leading this race. Yellow flag in the first sector for retiree Pablo Alvarez. Now a 6/10 gap between P1 and P2. 2 seconds between Fox and the top two. And he's got a comfortable 3-second gap behind to Ivan. It's just a matter of how far can he keep going to hammer out these laps. Down that main straight, we're going to see the Alfa Romeo go down the inside. There is contact between the Alfa Romeo and the Williams. You did see the collision into the wall. Virtual safety car, the first virtual safety car of this session. And the Williams with a massive front wing damage. You can see he's got nothing there. And hopefully that is the only damage in this lobby, on his car, sorry. As only the front wing can be repaired in the pits. But after a contact with the Alfa Romeo, trying to go for a move down the inside, a double overtake for the Alfa Romeo does involve then a collision with the Williams driver finding himself in the wall. So now, with a virtual safety car, the race is neutralized. No driver is to bunch up the grid. It is just a matter of slowing down the drivers to a certain percentage of the race speed. This will also halve the pit stop time. So if the virtual safety car remains out for at least another sector or a sector and a half, Alvaro can capitalize on what was once a mistake, an unfortunate mistake, or incident between him and another driver, and capitalize off of that and try and get through. As Alvaro now with a 5-second time penalty and a drive-through speeding. A very unfortunate race for the Williams, as I mess up my flurry of words there. And now into the pits. I suspect this could be the end of his race. A very unfortunate race for the Williams driver, but does also get a 5-second time penalty for speeding in pit lane. And there it is, retiree for the session. The 5th retirement of this session as Wario is trying to fight. And Harlem has come out of the second corner, or out of the first corner, had a bit of a spin. Unfortunately, has kept it out of the wall, but his car is just not under control. His rears are way overheating. And now he has gone tumbling down the order into 12th place. And once in the points, now out of the points. Stefano back into the points. He's now fighting too wide with Candy King. As Candy King finds himself up into the points now. As unfortunately Alvaro has left the session. Unfortunate race for the two Williams. Both of them in a position for potential point scoring finishes, but unfortunately with collisions they are now out of this race, as there is another collision ahead, and we see the Williams, also the Mercedes of Tomas, is now out of the race, and we have a full safety car. Unfortunately, spectating to Stefano, we saw just a mere glimpse of that front wing coming off, but that Mercedes is now out of the session, and Jat and Wario, the Alpine and McLaren, I am messing up my words this evening, are all into the pits. No double stacking at the moment, but all of them will be going for the soft compound tyres for 5 laps left in this race. Potential of 3 laps running and 1 lap of DRS. Unfortunately, the top 4 were past the pits, or past the window of opportunity to take a pit stop and grab themselves a fresh set of softs, and they will now lose a lot of positions as they've caught up to that safety car. So now, this race has changed. It once went from a fairly simple victory, a potential podium for the likes of Fox, Mark, and Sixton, to now Jat, Wario, and Max, the next top 3 in the standings with a fresh set of softs, are now in contention for a podium finish or better, a race victory around Spain, as they will now start this 28th lap of the race on fresh softs. So now, considering the amount of position that will be lost, they do still have that 15-second gap. Jat trying to close that gap down, 14 seconds now under safety car conditions. Can the top 4 somehow find the time and get into the pits and capitalize on this safety car, or are they going to continue to lose time and not be able to pit at all? You see Ivan now in the pit, so Jat is up into a podium position. And now with all of the drivers close together, all close, ready to battle it out for the last few laps in this race. We'll have to see what happens at the end of this session. There is a lot of reports for desync, and unfortunately there isn't much I can do for this issue at the moment in this lobby, but we do now have 4 laps remaining, and I just think that the Alfa Romeo Harlem and the McLaren of Tim will be able to catch up to the rest of the grid quite comfortably in the second sector, and we just might have that safety car in this lap message pop up. After a safety car, 2 laps after a safety car before DRS is enabled again, and so we will have, there it is, safety car in this lap. We will then have ourselves 2 laps of racing with DRS, if my math is correct. Yeah, we'll have 2 laps of DRS racing. I can count. As Max receives a 5-second time penalty for ignoring yellow flags. A very unfortunate penalty under safety car conditions, especially coming down towards the end of the session. You can see Harlem actually going into the pits there. Jat with a 5-second, Tim with a 5-second. Harlem is now retired from the session. Chaos ensues as Stefano with a 5-second. So 5 drivers have received a 5-second time penalty in this race from the safety car restart. Max is all over the gearbox of that McLaren ahead of him. Let's have a look from a better angle. Try and see how are they fighting in this. Now as Wario with the fresh set of softs managed to find himself up into P3, and without time penalties, he's going to possibly climb further. Have less of a fall behind if he gets a track limits penalty at all. Fox continues to tumble down the order. 14-lap-old mediums, not the way you want to go for a safety car restart. It is going to have a huge disadvantage around this circuit. And you can see him actually continue to tumble. And Wario with a 3-second time penalty for track limits. Very unfortunate race for him so far. It was very unfortunate for him at the end of this lap now. We see a Aljat, up into P2. 5-second time penalty for ignoring yellow flags, but Sixten continues to lead this race across the line for lap 31. And at the end of this lap, DRS will be enabled yet again, and Aljat into the lead of the race. And we're actually going to have a potential 3 wide of the Ferrari trying to go down the inside on the old mediums as well. And now Aljat into the lead. And the AlphaTauri trying to fight the Ferrari, trying to go 3 wide now. Nearly 4 wide down towards the 4th corner. And we're going to have to see now, down the inside goes the Alpine and the AlphaTauri and the Aston Martin. All of them fighting for position. Mark and 16 are tumbling down the order. The fresh softs, and this contact between the AlphaTauri and the Ferrari as Mark is now spun around. And we have a yellow flag in the second sector. But I do not think we're going to have a virtual safety car. No, it's cleared. And Mark is back underway and racing away. The 2 Aston Martins fighting for 5th and 6th. Now going 2 wide with Candy King in the corner 9. Now coming down that second DRS straight will not be enabled to the end of this lap. And we have a new top 3 order, 16 down to P4, but penalties are still yet to be applied at the end of this race. Tim trying to continue to close that gap. Max with a 3-second time penalty for track limits. unfortunately, sitting in P2, is going to find himself with 8 seconds now to serve at the end of the race as Aljat crosses the line with a 1:12.648. And you can see the two Aston Martins now closing that gap down between the two of them. Both of them on the softs, and the Alpha Tauri ahead of him on the old mediums. You can see his ERS light is blinking, is down to 10% contact between him and the Aston Martin. Does find him going off to the runoff road, but fortunately no damage to the Aston Martin. The AlphaTauri goes wide and unfortunately loses another position. Now down to 7th place, and Stefano up in 6th place. It's a 3-second time penalty for the AlphaTauris. He continues to tumble down to 9th place. New race leader, Aljat, has a 1.5 second lead to Max behind with a 4/10th lead to Wario. A quick look to the penalties. It could look to see Wario up on for a provisional race win, if my math is right with these penalties. We'll have to see what is going to happen towards the end of this race now as we come through the 10th and 11th corner. And we will have our final lap just around the corner as Ivan actually could potentially be our new race winner, as he has no penalties as in the top 5. If we have a quick look to see the intervals to leader, he is still within that 3.5 second gap to the race leader, who has 5 second time penalty, as he receives a 3 second time penalty for track limits. Just my luck as I talk about him, as we have now Wario going up into P2, Max dropping down, Stefano heavily under pressure by the two teammates behind, as there's collision between the Aston Martins as Ivan goes into the wall and the front wing is off of his car, and now he will find himself tumbling down the order and down and potentially now out of the point as Tim is up into P5, and Tim as well for the McLaren up into P6 with no track penalties. So now, on this final lap, just 2 sectors to go, can teammate of Tim in the McLaren, Aljat, continue to extend this lead? Unfortunately, that 5 second time penalty, unless removed, will be the loss of a race victory for this driver. And now we get to see on board with Aljat coming around that final corner, corner 14. And for the final time, he crosses that line and wins this race on track. But after penalties, Wario goes through for P1 and Stefano up into P3. And now Tim with the McLaren up into P2. It is a 2-3 for the McLarens. But Wario is our new race leader post penalties. This certainly has been one hell of a race. An interesting race, to say the least, sorry. But unfortunately, a lot of drivers retiring from the session, and a lot of problems, a lot of complaints for lobby connection problems. So something that will have to be reviewed afterwards. Unfortunately, we will have to see what is said afterwards. But provisionally, this race was quite exciting. A very unfortunate end for a lot of races, a lot of drivers to see them retire and have quite a few incidences. But there is your race leader, your race victor, the Alpine driver qualifying in 18th place, now up on for, pardon me, P1 with a McLaren 2-3 sitting from 16th place on the grid to 10th place on the grid. A 3-stop strategy for Tim Alders finds himself up on the podium step. A lot of penalties for drivers, but I do suspect a lot of these penalties will be removed, as there are reports for pit entry bugs. We'll have to see well after the session. I think it will have to be reported afterwards. But that will be it for me, guys. Thank you everyone for joining it. I do apologize if I mispronounced any names, but also for the several connection issues I had. But we will have to see what happens. So I believe that'll be it for this Tier 3 race. We'll have to see what has happened afterwards from the stewards or from the team. But thank you everyone for joining me, and thank you WR for allowing me to commentate this.